The name's Harry Dude. Crazy short, Harry Dude. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. I am the Crazy Short Harry Dude, and on tonight's episode, we are talking about the most famous spy in all of fiction. We are talking, of course, about Agent 007 himself, James Bond. So let's dive right in, and we will get started with this. So James Bond was created by British author Ian Fleming. Now, Ian Fleming was not only a writer, but in World War II, he worked in the naval intelligence division for in in Britain during the Second World War, and was involved in several different operations. And he even was involved in the planning and oversight of uh, two different intelligence units during that time. And he drew on that background and his experiences in the war for his novels. So he wrote his first novel, the first James Bond novel, which was Casino Royale, in 1952 at the age of 44, and it was a huge success. Um, and three different print runs were commissioned to meet the demand. So yeah, it flew off the shelves literally, and they had to reprint it three times just to keep up with demand when it first came out. Um, Overall, he wrote 11 different Bond novels and two collections of short stories between 1953 and 1966. And the novels center around the character James Bond, who is an officer in the Secret Intelligence Service, commonly known as MI6. Um, Bond is also known by his code number 007, um, and was a commander in the Royal Navy Volunteer Reserve. The Bond stories rank among the best fictional uh, series of books ever written, um, having sold over 100 million copies worldwide. And Fleming also wrote, just kind of to the side here, he also wrote the children's story Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which if you've never seen the if you've never read the book, you've probably seen the movie, um, which we'll get into a little bit of that later. So James Bond himself, he got the name James Bond from a, well from a bird watching book. He was trying to find the name of someone who would be it wouldn't be like a very it'd be a very common name. You wouldn't kind of it was the kind of name that wouldn't stand out to anybody, and he thought it would be kind of a plain boring name. Um, and he happened across a bird watching book written by a, a Dr. James Bond, and so that's where he got the name. Uh, and when it came to the film rights, uh, later on, that kind of hit a little bit of controversy. He sold the film rights for Casino Royale to one group of people, um, and then he sold the film rights to all the other stories to Albert Broccoli and um, Herbert Saltzman. Um, Saltzman and Broccoli, and they had not only creative rights the over the novels that well film rights over the novels that Fleming had written already, but they had permission to create future stories. Um, and so in the official James Bond franchise, they don't start with the first movie was not Casino Royale in the official franchise. The first film was Doctor No, which came out in 1962 and starred Sean Connery, who was a relatively unknown actor at the time. He had been in a few other films and he'd done some work here and there, but nothing this big. Um, at first, Ian Fleming was unsure about Connery playing the role, but after seeing him in Doctor No and From Russia with Love, which was the second Bond film, that came out in 1963. Fleming loved Connery in the role so much that he changed Bond's origins and background to make him Scottish. Uh, he doesn't necessarily speak with a Scottish accent in most adaptations, but he is originally from Scotland, and that was Connery's influence on Fleming there. Sean Connery went on to he played Bond in 5 official films with uh, under Albert Broccoli and Herbert Saltzman's production company. Doctor No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, and You Only Live Twice. Oh, sorry, no, he did a 6th film. That's my bad. Um, After You Only Live Twice, Connery had left the franchise um, over some creative differences and just kind of being tired of playing the character over and over again. And then the production team turned and tried to find another Bond, and they hired a an Australian model whose name is George Lazenby. George Lazenby was only in one film, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, that came out in 1969, and overall, not the greatest Bond film. It has its moments and it had potential, but and this is my opinion, Lazenby's performance was very wooden, and he just did not make a convincing Bond for me. Uh, I think his best piece of acting was at the end of the film, which is the most. He gave the most real performance in the last few seconds of the movie. Um, the rest of it, not so much. Uh, but that's again my opinion. After that film, Lazenby was out, and Connery came back in for one more official Bond film in the franchise, Diamonds Are Forever, bringing the total up to 6 for him. Uh, Later on, he would appear as James Bond in another film with a different production company called, well, the film was called Never Say Never Again. Um, Again, they were able to do that due to some legal issues with the rights to the story Thunderball. Uh, So Never Say Never Again is pretty much just a remake of Thunderball with Sean Connery reprising his role. Not a bad film. Um, Not as good as some of the other ones, but still, it's a good one. And it's not in the official Bond series, but yeah, still, it's a fun watch. After Connery came, after he left, after Diamonds Are Forever, uh, they hired Roger Moore, who had found success on television with the series The Saint. Um, And so now Roger Moore was Bond, and he probably did the most uh, Bond films. Let's see, 7, yeah, 7 Bond films: Live and Let Die, The Man with the Golden Gun, The Spy Who Loved Me, Moonraker, For Your Eyes Only, Octopussy, and A View to a Kill. Um, Now, the Sean Connery era was started off a little more grounded in reality and like using real gadgets and tech that spies actually use. Like, for example, in From Russia with Love, um, Bond uses a a folding rifle that all the pieces kind of fit inside the butt of the gun, and then you take it out and put it together. It's not a high caliber rifle, probably a 22, but yeah, it's a very practical and real life thing. It is out there. You can find them. His briefcase too uh, had uh, little hidden pockets with some gold sovereigns in it. If you don't know what those are, it's currency, and it had a little throwing knife hidden in it. Very practical things. And then once we get into Goldfinger, they started to stretch it a little bit. Um, Now the Goldfinger did introduce the famous Aston Martin, the classic James Bond car. 1964 Aston Martin DB5. It was beautiful, gorgeous, awesome. But the film started to kind of exaggerate and stretch the tech a little bit. Um, by the time we get to Roger Moore, the tech gets even more ridiculous and stretched, and the stories start to do that as well. Especially when they got to 1979's Moonraker. That one, in my opinion, it's just kind of it's a travesty. Cause I've read the novel, and the novel is way better. Um, in 1979, they were competing with these different space movies coming out and trying to. Um, yeah, there was also like some ecological movements going on at the same time. So that's what the film kind of focused on, and it really changed the story up from the book. I do recommend reading the book. It is fantastic and a great story involving a hidden Nazi spy who disguises himself uh, as a British um, war hero and a missile defense system and all kinds of stuff, and it's really really good. Whereas the film, you know, spoiler alert, had to do with a a mad billionaire who wants to wipe out humanity and start the human race over again with his own perfect people and live in a more eco-friendly planet. Um, so basically, you had James Bond going up to space and shooting laser guns. Yeah, not the greatest. Um, they brought it back down to reality in the next film, which was For Your Eyes Only, which is probably my favorite Roger Moore film. It was grounded, it had a realistic story, had more realistic gadgets, and overall, it was just a fun and great movie. His last film was A View to a Kill in 1985, and in that one you can see a young Christopher Walken playing the villain, so that one's fun to watch. After Roger Moore left, came in Timothy Dalton. Now, originally, producers wanted Pierce Brosnan to play the role after Roger Moore. Problem was, Brosnan's television series Remington Steele got picked up by another network, and they had to continue. He had to leave to continue filming that, um, which that show brought him some really good success too. But now the Bond films were left without a Bond, so they brought in Timothy Dalton. And Timothy Dalton, I think he played the character more like what Ian Fleming originally had written. Um, and he mostly focused, and the writers too, they focused on making Bond um, more brooding, a little darker, grittier, and that shows in his two films, The Living Daylights and License to Kill. They are darker, they are more grounded. Uh, some of the technology in there, yes, is stretched, like what he does with his Aston Martin, and there's like a heads-up display and a missile system, or a little tiny rocket system, things like that. They were a little stretched, but they were definitely darker than the Roger Moore films, and I think society at the time was just not quite ready for that. Um, so his films didn't do so well, and a lot of people forget about Timothy Dalton. But if you watch the films, they are they are good Bond movies. So yeah, he's an underrated Bond. Yeah, go watch those. Um, then in 1995, they started the. Uh, it wasn't like really a reboot of the franchise, but they were able to finally get Pierce Brosnan in, and so they brought him in for GoldenEye, his best Bond performance and the best Bond film of his era. GoldenEye 1995, directed uh, by I forget his name off the top of my head, but same director behind Casino Royale and the Antonio Banderas Zorro films. Yeah, so really good. Um, And Brosnan was able to bridge the gap between the Roger Moore, more not exactly silly, but more um, lighthearted attitude in his films, and the darker uh, Timothy Dalton films. And Pierce Brosnan was a good middle ground there. He also looked a lot like the character in the books. So, um, so Pierce Brosnan's movies, Goldeneye, and then he made Tomorrow Never Dies in 1997, and 1999 was The World Is Not Enough, and then bringing us into um, the 21st century with Die Another Day in 2002. Now, I think everybody tends to remember Goldeneye and Die Another Day. Goldeneye being the best of his films, and Die Another Day not being the greatest one. Um, not to say his performance was bad, because he's great in all of his films and all those Bond films. It just it wasn't the greatest. But people tend to forget Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough, which were good. Uh, they weren't spectacular, but they were good and they're fun. So yeah, worth the watch. Then after 2002, the Bond franchise kind of went into a legal battle again, and during the process of all that, they were able to, the filmmakers were able to actually get the rights to Casino Royale, the original James Bond story. So they decided this is a perfect time to kind of reboot the franchise, bring in a younger actor, and do and tell Bond's kind of his origin story of sorts, and do the first novel and do it well. So there had been a previous Casino Royale film made back in the, I think, the late '60s, early '70s, and it was more of a comedy, and it it just kind of made fun of the spy franchise and genre, and it wasn't that good. It had a lot of big name actors, but this wasn't that great of a film. So this was the time for them to really do it justice. And so 2006, Casino Royale came out and introduced Daniel Craig as James Bond, the first blonde Bond. I think I seem to remember like a newsreel or something that says Bond's gone blonde, or something like that. But Craig proved himself. He was um, a little darker than Brosnan's Bond, but not quite as dark as Timothy Dalton in some ways until later on. But the world seemed to be ready for a darker, grittier, more grounded James Bond story, and that's what we got in Casino Royale. Um, that one is one of the best, if not the best, Bond film. Then in 2008, we have Quantum of Solace, which was a direct sequel to Casino Royale, um, and it was fun. It was exciting. Um, got to see Bond kind of going on a little bit of a revenge kick. Um, and yeah, it was fun. It wasn't nearly as good as Casino Royale, but it was still fun. Then Skyfall, 2012, the 50th anniversary of the film franchise Skyfall. Oh man, Skyfall really just upped the ante, um, and it is. I could kind of go back and forth between which one is better, Casino Royale or Skyfall. It was really really well done. Uh, had a fantastic story, and yeah, it was awesome. And Adele did the opening song for that film, Skyfall, which she won an Oscar for that year. So yeah, it was really really good. Then the last two films in the franchise so far um, were 2015's Spectre, which brought back classic Bond villain Ernst Stavro Blofeld, played by Christoph Waltz, and yeah, we got to see Bond kind of navigating a kind of different world of espionage of sorts, and it wasn't a direct sequel to Skyfall, but there were some connecting events, which was kind of interesting and fun. Then in 2021, we got the last film in the Daniel Craig series, which was No Time to Die. Yeah, this one, it said Bond is back with a vengeance, and he was. Uh, the film, the film was good, not as good as some of the other films, um, but I think it was a good way to end Daniel Craig's run as Bond. Um, at the time when I saw it, I was not happy with the ending because they did something that no other Bond film has done before. Um, I won't spoil it if you haven't seen it, but uh, yeah, I was not happy with the ending at first. Now I'm okay with it because it was a good way for his Bond to end. Uh, Now the film franchise is kind of up in the air. There's some issues with Amazon. They bought out MGM, which was uh, the parent company, I guess, for that had the Bond films. But in the contract, uh, the Broccoli family still has creative control over the Bond franchise, and so there's been a lot of issues between Amazon wanting to move Bond to the streaming service, um, and and the family wanting to keep it as theatrical releases, which Amazon apparently in their contract had promised to do, but they're kind of going back on that for some reason. So right now the Bond film franchise is up in the air. Who's playing the next James Bond? I don't know. It's anybody's guess right now. There's been a lot of actors named, and I think um, they could go in a few different directions. Personally, I would like to see uh, the franchise go back to the 50s and 60s. Like go back and do the Ian Fleming novels and like just do the straight adaptations of the Fleming novels, especially like Moonraker and ones like that. Have we seen films based off of those before? Yes, but I would like to see Ian Fleming's Bond on the big screen like that. And yeah, I think it would be fun to kind of go back to that era in Bond's uh, in Bond's life. Uh, but I'm not the one in charge. So, now the video games, there have been a lot of different Bond video games over the years. Probably the most popular one has been GoldenEye. Um, Everybody seems to remember that one very fondly, and in fact, you can still play it. I was able to find one on a version of it on Xbox One that you could get. It was in a bundle pack, but still, it was fun to go back and play that. Um, During the Daniel Craig era, there was a few different ones too. Well, mostly the video games came out during the Brosnan and um, the Craig era, but we did get to see one Sean Connery video game, which was From Russia with Love, and Sean Connery came back and actually did the voice for Bond for that one, so that was cool. Um, I think that one released on PlayStation 2 and Xbox, like maybe the original Xbox or maybe 360. Um, I know the Brosnan ones, they had a few different video games. Um, the Craig ones are the ones I'm a little more familiar with. We didn't have a Casino Royale, but we did have a Quantum of Solace game, which covered the events of Casino Royale and Quantum. That was a lot of fun. That video game was a lot of fun. Then we got um, Bloodstone, 007 Bloodstone. That was fun. I still have that one. Um, then they came out with one called 007 Legends, which was really really cool. I need to see if I can find another copy of it. Um, we got to see Daniel Craig's Bond play through, um, and you got to play through the different missions from some of the old films, like Goldfinger and On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I think Moonraker and a couple other ones. So it was a lot of fun to play through that and see the modern Bond uh, in those events. Then they did a remake of GoldenEye, GoldenEye Reloaded or something like that, and I'm pretty sure that one had Daniel Craig's Bond in there. I did not get the chance to play it, but I'm gonna see if I can find a copy. And now we have a brand new James Bond video game, 007 First Light, just released. If you pre-ordered it, it came out yesterday. If not, today's the day. And so far, from what I have seen and the little bit I've been able to play of it, uh, I love it. It is fantastic. This is it's from the same studio that's the Hitman franchise for years now, and it is fantastic. Uh, they they've taken Bond back to kind of his origins, doing a modern take on his origins, in a brand new story with a different actor, playing Bond, a younger actor, and he does a great job. Um, and really they've incorporated some things from the books that have not been seen in the movies before. Like, did you know that James Bond actually has a scar on his face? He does. He has a scar on his face. Um, that's mentioned in the books several times, um, and they put it into the video game, so you actually get to see that. That's something the movies have not done up to this point. Uh, Oh, and I almost forgot to mention uh, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang earlier. So Ian Fleming wrote the story, and when they decided to make the film, it was the same production team behind the James Bond films. So Albert Broccoli and Herbert Saltzman, they made the film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Uh, the actor who plays the villain in kind of the Baron Bombburst, the ruler of Bulgaria or whatever the country's name was. He's the actor who played the villain in Goldfinger or Goldfinger. So there's a little bit of a connection there. Uh, yeah, it makes sense that Ian Fleming would write, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and you got uh, a car with a lot of gadgets and a lot of cool features. So, so you got that going. So it makes sense. Um, yeah, from books to from books to movies to video games to Funko Pops. James Bond has been around for a long time now, over 60 years, and he will continue to inspire um, and entertain. So until next time, hope everybody's well, hope everybody's happy, and remember, God bless. Jesus loves you. Good night.